There's something deeply unsettling about swimming pools at night. What once held the laughter of summer memories, can quickly turn into a place of fear, secrets, and things better left undisturbed. Welcome to Whispers in the Dark, where true horror stories come alive. Tonight, you'll hear 4 terrifying real experiences that took place around swimming pools. From a deranged attacker in a public changing room, to a haunting memory of drowning, wasps from hell, and a party that ended in a nightmare. Get comfortable, or don't. Let the water ripple. And listen closely. Story 1, The Man with the Machete in the Changing Room, complete version. People often argue about who should or shouldn't be allowed into public changing rooms. But today, I'm not here to discuss rules or policies. I just want to tell you a story that still sends chills down my spine every time I step into a changing room. It happened in a place that should have been the safest, the women's changing room at a sports center with a public swimming pool that I used to frequent. It was a place where I'd go to relax and unwind, but after that day, it was never the same again. That day, I was with 3 friends, my closest gym buddies, getting changed to go for a swim. We usually came here a few times a week, working out, chatting, supporting each other. It was a fun routine, a small joy in the midst of our busy lives. The changing room was quiet that day. Besides the 4 of us, there was an elderly woman, thin, gentle looking. I hadn't seen her there before. I had just taken off my jacket when suddenly, there was a series of strange sounds, heavy footsteps, a scream, then something crashing onto the tiled floor. It only lasted a few seconds, but the room fell completely silent. We froze, looking at one another. I could feel my chest tightening, like my body knew something terrible was about to happen. And then, he appeared. The man burst in like he was being chased by a demon. He wore old, muddy gym shorts and a dingy, stained white tank top. But the most terrifying thing wasn't his appearance, it was what he was holding, a large, rusty machete, jagged and worn like it had just been pulled from a junkyard. His hair was wild, eyes wide, and white with madness, like someone who had just escaped from a psychiatric ward. Sweat dripped from his face as he scanned each of us, not just looking, but scrutinizing, like he was choosing his prey. Then, out of nowhere, he screamed, a high-pitched, furious, panicked scream, and charged straight at me. I couldn't react in time. It all happened so fast. A scream burst from my throat while my limbs froze. I stumbled backward, crashing into a row of metal lockers. Just as he was only a few steps away, a group of police officers stormed in from the hallway. Their voices boomed, "Freeze! Drop the weapon!" Startled, he turned sharply, then shoved the elderly woman aside in an attempt to flee. She tumbled into one of the officers running toward us. My heart dropped, but thankfully, she only suffered minor scratches. Nothing serious. One officer helped her up while the others gave chase. We stood there, paralyzed. No one moved a muscle. Seconds later, more screams echoed, this time from the public pool area. Then, a gunshot rang out. I couldn't breathe. We had no idea what was going on outside, and none of us dared to step out. The silence was so thick, I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Eventually, an officer returned and told us the situation was under control. But the sense of safety had left that room forever. No one felt like swimming. We got dressed in silence and left. As I walked out of the sports center, I saw him, the Machete man, pinned down by police, face to the ground, hands cuffed behind his back, being shoved into a patrol car. He wasn't screaming anymore. He wasn't struggling. Just a dirty silhouette stretched under the harsh sunlight. People said he had been wandering around the neighborhood with that machete, threatening pedestrians, then broke into the sports center while trying to escape the police. No one knew if he was on drugs or mentally ill, but one thing was certain, he was extremely dangerous. We never saw that elderly woman again. Maybe she was too afraid. I understand that, and honestly, I feel relieved she wasn't seriously hurt. Even if just for a split second, she was dangerously close to harm. But the scariest part? I think he got released. Last week, I stopped by a Wendy's near my house to grab food. While waiting at the drive-thru, I saw an employee mopping the floor inside, a man in a clean red uniform, shirt tucked in, hair neatly trimmed. And when he turned to face me, I knew it was him. That face. Those eyes. Unmistakable. I shivered, my whole body going cold, even though the AC in my car was off. Since then, I always carry pepper spray in my bag. I started noting all the emergency exits whenever I step into any gym or public building. I no longer see those places as safe, because now I know, fear can wear any mask. Even that of a janitor. Even on a sunny day. And me? I'm always watching. Because I know some faces stay with you for life. If you've ever experienced something that shattered your sense of safety, that made you question even the most familiar places, I get it. If this story gave you chills, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your experience. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more real creepy stories like this one. Story 2, The Memory I Never Spoke of. I think I'm older than most of you listening. I'm 61, and this happened when I was just 12, and Clarky was 11. I'm British, literally from England, so forgive me if the way I tell this is a bit different. It's strange, but I still feel nervous writing this down. You probably don't need to know that, but I want to emphasize, this story has haunted me my entire life. Every time I dwell on it for too long, I get nauseous. And once you've heard it, I think you'll understand why. I met Clarky back in primary school. We became friends from day one at a small suburban school. I saw him playing with little green army men in the corner of the classroom, and from that moment on, we were inseparable. From then on, we did everything together. Best friends. Partners in crime. The kind of kids everyone liked. I was more outgoing, and Clarky was a bit shy, but we balanced each other out. I guess you could say I was a fairly popular kid back then. But everything changed when we moved up to secondary school. In the UK, we don't have middle school like in some countries. You go straight from primary to secondary at age 11. That means, overnight, you're thrown into a world of much older kids, some 16, even 18. We went from being the kings of our old school to feeling like tiny, lost nobodies in a sea of strangers. It was overwhelming. We thought we'd be placed in the same class, but they did the opposite, intentionally splitting up friends to encourage new ones. Clarky got put in the blue group. I was in red. Not just different classes, different entire sections. We only saw each other during breaks or after school. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to cover the loneliness, the confusion, or the bullying. We both became targets, each of us by different groups. And somehow, no one seemed to notice. No teacher picked up on it. No parent asked why we were becoming so quiet, so tired. Then came Jonah and Jake. We called them the bastards, but only in whispers, and only when safe, alone in my room or Clarky's. At school, no one dared speak their names. Jonah was sharp and cruel with words. Jake was bigger and more physical. Together, they were terrifying. Every act of bullying that truly hurt seemed to have their fingerprints on it. We learned to live quietly, to avoid notice, to stay out of sight. The wounds weren't just on our bodies, they were deep in our sense of self. Slowly, we withdrew from the world. It wasn't until the summer term that we learned about the school pool. That was the first time I'd seen Clarky in class again, because swimming was divided by gender. After months of misery, seeing him standing in line by the pool that day felt like a beam of light breaking through the dark. One Monday afternoon after swimming class, we stayed behind just to avoid the chaos of the changing rooms. The teacher had rushed off somewhere, tossing us the keys and asking us to lock up. That's when Clarky said, "Want to jump back in for a bit?" He smiled a smile I hadn't seen in ages. I jumped in. He followed. We played like kids again. Real kids. Just for a few minutes. Then Jonah and Jake showed up. I still don't know how they got there, or why they chose that moment. But the second I saw them, the warmth of the water turned cold on my skin. We were trapped, stuck in the middle of the pool. Nowhere to run. Jonah and Jake stepped to the edge, tossed out a few mocking jokes, and then, they invited us. A false friendliness, thinly veiling something much more sinister. Then they dared Clarky to stick his head into one of the underwater drain grates, one of those metal-covered outlets that should have been sealed tight, but had been loose for who knows how long. I shook my head. I was scared. I begged Clarky not to do it. But somehow, maybe from pressure, maybe just wanting it all to end, he did it. And Jonah used his foot to press the grate down once Clarky's head was inside. Clarky thrashed. Panicked. I screamed and swam to him, clawing at the grate, trying to pull it off. But Jonah's weight had jammed it down. Then, a snapping sound. A horrible, dry crack. Clarky stopped moving. Everything froze. Jonah stared in shock. So did Jake. No one spoke until Jonah whispered, "Don't tell anyone." Then they both ran. I dragged Clarky up. His head lolled to the side. Still. His neck broken. All because of some stupid joke. I screamed. Sobbed. Shook like a real child. That was the last time I saw my best friend alive. I remember that moment so vividly, not fear, but emptiness. I sat there, water lapping gently at my knees, still holding Clarky's body. All the noise around me felt muffled. The only thing I could hear was my own heartbeat, pounding against my ribs so hard I thought it might tear through. The adults came eventually, teachers, the headmaster, then the ambulance. They pulled me away, asked questions, shouted. But I didn't hear them. I just stared at the spot where Clarky's head had been trapped, now nothing but gentle ripples in the water. They called it an accident. No real investigation. Jonah and Jake unsurprisingly said Clarky had done it himself. That they were just witnesses. And since no one else would back me up, they got away with it. My parents forced me to transfer schools. Thought it would help. But I never really left that place. Every time I closed my eyes, I went back there. I used to wonder if I'd screamed louder, if I'd been stronger, if I'd stopped him, would he still be alive? I've lived with those ifs for decades. And they've done nothing but weigh me down with guilt and regret. Jonah and Jake. They moved on. Jonah went to law school, I heard. Jake runs a car garage. No one ever knew what really happened. No one but me. And them. I didn't tell this story for almost 50 years. Not because I feared them, but because I feared myself. Feared hearing that bone break again. The bubbling water. Clarky's final gasp. That moment I realized I'd lost the only person who ever truly understood me. I'm telling this today, not for forgiveness, but so that someone, just one person, knows Clarky existed. That there was once a friendship so beautiful, it deserved to be remembered. Even if it now lies buried in cold water, beneath the silent fluorescent lights of a school swimming pool. Thank you for listening. If this story reminded you of someone who once meant the world to you, don't keep it inside. Talk about them. Remember them. And live, as if they're still walking beside you, every step, every breath. If you like stories like this, don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more real, heartbreaking, and haunting tales. Story 3, The Mystery from DOM. I attended a charter school in Minnesota in the early 90s, back when that type of school was really popping off. A new one had opened the year before I was due to start school, and I guess it appealed to my parents. In my memory, the school was in a converted mansion, but I was about 5, so who knows how accurate my memory of this place is. I remember it being a damp and musty place with a small number of students. Us little kids were on the first floor, then the classrooms for older kids were on the next floor up, then the teachers' rooms above that, and an attic. As you move through the school system, you move from classrooms deeper into the building, I guess. I didn't stay at that school long enough to have classes on the second floor, so I don't remember what they were like. I do remember being in the attic once or twice, though, maybe one Christmas, and I can't remember why, but thinking about it makes me feel weird and unsettled. I hate it when someone says, "Now for a bit of backstory," but you need to know a little bit about the family that ran the school. There was our principal, Mrs. Howe, and she ran the school. If you've ever seen the old British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, that's exactly what Mrs. Howe looked like. She could have been her twin, honestly. Then there was her husband, Mr. Howe, and looking back, I had no idea what he did at the school. He was like some kind of businessman. He'd occasionally teach us children's subjects, but I don't think he was actually a teacher by profession. He was a weird guy. I remember him being ridiculously tall and lanky, thinning hair and wet, watery eyes. He'd mumble and sort of stutter, but if he got mad at you, then he got really mad. His face would go red, and his eyes bulged when he yelled. We were all a bit afraid of him, but also kind of disgusted, I guess. He just had this air of being gross for some unknown reasons. Mrs. Howe, I remember being pretty stern, and then occasionally really nice out of the blue, especially to me. She gave me a Christmas present once, and I never understood why at the time. None of the other kids at the school got a Christmas present from the principal. The Howes had 3 kids, and one of them, Wally we'll call him, was in the same class as me, and I guess these days you'll call him special needs. He was really clumsy, a little gangly kid who was happy all of the time, except when he'd inevitably hurt himself in some accident or another. Then he'd howl and bawl for a hot minute, and you always knew that he was entering the classroom because he'd somehow managed to crash through desks and chairs and send everything flying. Then there was the middle child, who I guess must have been a high schooler. She was only around occasionally, after classes and during weekend events, and in anything where I guess her parents dragged her along. She was a pretty standard 90s goth-looking girl, and as a little kid I knew nothing about her, she was just kinda there. Then there was the oldest son, Dom. He was in his early 20s and was back from college after graduating around that time. We didn't think anything of it as kids, but he was hanging around that school all the damn time. Just the principal's adult son, lurking around an elementary school. He was a normal guy, although also extremely tall. In almost every memory I have of the 2 years that I spent at that school, he was around. Sports day, Christmas festival, bake sale, even during the school weeks. I don't know if I'm remembering his looming presence more than it actually was, but you can see how this is weird already, right? They were a weird family, but of course, a little kid doesn't really pick up on things like that or consider how odd it is to have both a weird husband and a weird adult son just hanging around your school all the time. Eventually I did find it weird though, and then eventually, terrifying. This school also had a pool. The school was in the countryside, just past suburbia, so there was a lot of trees around the outskirts of the grounds. The pool was an outdoor pool built in a forest canopy, just down a path from the play areas where we had recess, and to the right of the school playing field. That first summer at the school we didn't use the swimming pool at all, and I remember all us kids being super disappointed after we'd been so excited to see it when we originally started. The second year though, it was a really hot summer beginning in early May, and they hired people to come and clean the pool and give it an overhaul. It was a huge deal. Everyone was excited about the pool finally getting to be used again, but it had become a bit taboo. We'd get yelled at massively if we went to the pool area when we weren't supposed to, which I guess is fair enough, because it would have been dangerous if anyone fell into the uncovered pool. It was always uncovered back when we didn't use it, and filled with leaves, tree branches, insects, and very foul, disgusting water. So instead of buying a cover or hiring a pool cleaner, they just instilled this fear of God into us not to go near it. But then they cleaned it, got an actual cover, and we could go near it again. We had swimming lessons overseen by our various teachers, and there was a recreational swimming club held on Thursdays where we could just play in the pool with floaties and toys. The dressing rooms for the pool were two small shacks under the tree line, boys and girls. They were old buildings. I had no idea what the school was before it was a school, but the changing rooms felt like they came from that time. Despite being a fairly expensive charter school, they didn't spend much money on upkeep as far as I can remember, and I guess cleaning the pool exhausted their pool budget because the changing rooms were absolutely foul. You had to be really careful not to sit on or brush against the benches because they were wooden and splintery. There were spiders and other insects all over the place, and it was just icky and gross, and oftentimes, if we had swimming, we'd just wear our swimsuits to school that day under our clothes, so it was just at least quicker to change and get into the pool. We also had a rule that we weren't allowed to lock any doors at that school ever. This was because one kid had gotten themselves locked in the bathroom stall for the entire lunch break and had a panic attack, so instead of fixing the locks and improving things, We were just told to not lock any doors so we wouldn't get stuck anywhere. We didn't even consider locking the dressing rooms or anything because of this, even though they had old bolt-type locks. This is why Dom, the weird adult son that I mentioned earlier, was able to just stroll into the dressing rooms. I don't know why he, of all people, had been tasked with making sure that the kids were changed and ready for swimming. He would sometimes oversee us in the pool, but again, he was just the principal's adult son, not really a teacher. For sure not something they'd get away with these days, at least I hope not, but in the early 90s at a charter school, absolutely, especially when you know certain things about this school that we'll eventually find out here. Now anyway, it wasn't at all unusual for Dom to burst in on kids changing. He even made a joke of it. He burst in and yelled boo, and of course we'd all laugh at this. It was just a boy bursting in on other boys. He didn't do it to the girls. And I remember even back then, I didn't like it at all, but at the age, I had my own issues going on and really struggled to vocalize discomfort or fear. This one particular day, we were coming up to the summer break and it was blistering hot out, a very sweaty day, and I was dragging my heels. The rest of my friends had already changed and were in the pool, and I was taking my time getting into my swim trunks. I hadn't remembered to wear them from home, so I was fully halfway through changing when the door creaked open. Boo! Dom said. His voice was quieter than usual. I'm sure he knew I was alone in there, but I didn't think that at the time, of course. My heart was immediately pounding. I'd only been alone with Dom once before, in the attic that previous Christmas, and he made me super uncomfortable and scared then, so he made me feel the same way now. Hurry it up, Ben, he told me. Everyone's out there playing already. I expected him to leave, but he didn't. The door had swung shut behind him, and he just stood there watching me with his arms folded. He was holding my swim trunks over the front of myself, and the only way that I could put them on was by doing it in front of Dom. This made me feel a coldness deep down inside my belly that I'd never really felt before. I really didn't want to do this in front of him, but he was an adult and the principal's son, and I didn't want to get in trouble by saying anything either. Instead, I compromised and turned my back to him, quickly slipping the trunks up my legs. Boo! Dom grabbed my shoulders. I hadn't heard him come up behind me, and in the split second it took me to realize what had happened. Imagining him sneaking up on me while I was changing, I felt awful in a way that I cannot describe. I whirled around and fell backwards against the bench, which was rough and splintery and cut into my bare legs, and immediately I started crying because I was a little kid and I was scared and hurt, and Dom's face got angry. Hey, don't cry, he scolded. I was just playing a trick on you. Don't be a little baby. He reached forward and grabbed my arm, hard, and it hurt. He pulled me to my feet and around him. Again, It really hurt. I wasn't used to physical punishment, and I was worried that he was going to spank me or something. I don't know if I intentionally shoved him or he tripped or what. Now, officially, he tripped, but of course he would say that because he wouldn't want to explain what he'd been doing to me in the first place. He stumbled backwards slightly and knocked against the flimsy wall of the dressing room. Suddenly I heard a sound that I wasn't expecting at all, a strange thwomp sound and then wild, strong buzzing. Something had been knocked clear from the rafters of the changing room. It was a frickin' wasp nest. An angry, disturbed wasp nest getting smacked to the floor in the tiny confines of the changing room, and pretty much immediately a huge cloud of wasps swarmed out of the remnants of that paper hive. Dom let out the sort of strangled cries that began to buzz towards him angrily. Then he ran forward and fully shoved me out of the way, so I fell back and hit the wall on the other side. It took him a moment to open the door, and again, I can't say for sure because it was all kinds of chaos with the whole wasp attack scenario, but I am certain that he had to unlock the door to get out, which means that he'd locked it behind him when he came in. Whether this was a detail I've added in my mind later or not, I don't know, but I don't think so. Dom ran out, screaming like a high-pitched weirdo, and the cloud of wasps followed him. I was already crying, but my eyes welled with fresh tears as I felt a sting on my right shoulder. And that's all, though, just a singular sting. And when I went outside, it was still chaos. Teachers were batting towels at wasps while others ushered the kids out of the pool. Dom himself was swatting and flapping at the wasps with his bare hands, still shrieking over and over. I just ran to where my friends were going and got out of there. It took a while for the wasps to disperse and for some teacher to recover our clothes, so we were all sitting around on the playing fields in our swimsuits. Nothing really happened immediately after all of this. We didn't see Dom at the school again. I heard that he'd suffered from a lot of wasp stings. Good, the creeper. And when that school year ended, I was told during that summer that I'd be changing to a different school next semester. It was never explained why, but I didn't really need to ask. Even at that age, I knew Dom had tried to do a really bad thing, and that this was a good reason for me to leave that school. I didn't really mind leaving my friends. I had friends who already went to the new school as well, so it'd be fun. And I only found out much later that it was a lot weirder and creepier than I knew. The principal and her husband were basically scammers, running a school and getting charter funding as well as tuition fees, while spending the absolute bare minimum on upkeep, curriculum, and student safety. So some real tax dodgy things there. Eventually, Mr. Howe was pursued by the law for some kind of fraud or embezzlement. A wild story in itself, but one I can't really share because the details are so uniquely weird that it'd be too easy to work out who these people were. Not that I want to protect them, just myself. Maybe I'm being overly cautious. They were bad people after all, but the principle is still out there, and who knows, maybe there's a way that she could be litigious. DOM isn't still out there though, at least not now. My mom found out via the local paper a few years after the embezzlement things that DOM had been sent to prison for completely unrelated crimes. Yeah, sadly in his 40s he'd gotten into a relationship with a woman who had 2 kids and abused both of them. I don't know the details of the abuse, and I don't want to know. It chills me enough knowing the lucky escape that I had, and I try not to fixate on the fact that I'm certain the changing room door was locked when he tried to leave. Maybe I would have been fine, but that doesn't stop me from thanking God for those wasps, and hopefully it really hurt when they stung that predator, because he absolutely deserved that, and far, far worse. If this story gave you chills, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your experience. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to hear more real creepy stories like this one. Story 4, The Party Shattered Under the Pool Lights. When this happened, it was late summer, and at the time I was female, 21 years old, finishing up college before med school. The only important detail really is knowing that we were a group of 4 girls, all around 20 to 21, having a small pool party in a raised backyard pool at our shared house. It was maybe around 10, possibly a bit earlier. We'd been drinking on and off for about an hour or 2, and spirits were high. We were having fun. We were relaxed, and we were chilled out, and it was the perfect evening. The sun was beginning to set over the forest on the outskirts of our suburban property, and the mouth-watering smell of the Petersons' barbecue was making me hungry, and it seemed like they'd had the same idea as us, to have a backyard party, and sometimes, when our music paused, you could hear theirs in the background. There'd been a bunch of kids at the Petersons' party earlier, but now the raucous noise of children playing had died down, and everything was chill. The girls and I were just kicking back, listening to, well, whatever was popular with us back then, I guess, and enjoying a bit of downtime from the last grueling year of studying, work, and personal drama. We were drinking cocktails, the glasses sitting on the side of the outdoor above-ground pool, just having a good time. We were doing absolutely nothing to invite or deserve what came next. The back gate to our property opened. This wasn't particularly alarming in and of itself. There was 5 of us total living in that house, and Janet B was out at work and expected home soon. It could also have been Claire or Dana's boyfriends, or any number of people, really. Our house was gathering central back then, and it was normal for trusted people to let themselves in the back gate instead of coming in the front door, especially if they could hear us partying in the yard. I couldn't see the gate myself from the pool, I had my back to it, but I could tell from Kelly and Claire's reactions that whoever had entered through the back gate shouldn't have been there. "Who the hell are they?" Kelly asked. I turned around in the pool. 3 guys strolled into the yard. They looked around college age and sauntered over with confidence that I'd seen in a million frat dudes. I didn't recognize any of them, but maybe one of the girls did, and alarm bells weren't ringing just yet. "Can we help you guys?" Dana asked. A quick look at Claire and Kelly told me that they didn't know the boys either. The lead frat guy gave this big, stupid grin, and even then, without any real evidence, I had a strong feeling that we might be in trouble. He looked almost wolfish and predatory, and I didn't like it. "We were just in the area, thought we'd swing by," he said, or something like that. Kelly, always the smart ass, told him that he should swing back on out the way he came, and that made him laugh. "No, seriously," I said. "Janet. Are you guys looking for Janet?" They shot a look at each other. "Janet? Sure," the bigger guy in the back said. They introduced themselves, probably with made-up names, I thought later, and I don't remember what they said their names were, so I'll always just call them Chad, Brad, and Vlad when I tell this story. Might as well get some fun out of an otherwise horrible incident. "Well, Janet's at work," I told them. "I'm not sure when she'll be back." Chad at the front beamed again, saying, "Well, that's fine." "Wait, why are you looking for Janet?" Claire asked. "Oh, you know. She owes us," Brad said. "Janet? Really?" Janet was the most sensible of all of us. She was the least likely to owe anyone money, and the most likely to be out at work while the rest of us had a pool party. I guess I grilled them on it because Chad came up to the pool ledge. "Yeah, she owes us. But any of you can pay up on her behalf if you're so inclined," he said. "Yeah, no thanks," I thought. So to explain our outdoor pool, it was one of those above-ground units that could be assembled, disassembled, and moved, rather than a pool built into the ground. It was sort of halfway between a pool and a hot tub, I guess. Like a hot tub, but bigger and without jets or heating. You know the type of old pool I mean. Now, getting in and out required a ladder, a separate piece that clipped over the side of the pool. One side of the ladder went vertically down into the pool, and the other angled outward, like a playground slide. Without the ladder, it was technically possible to get out by dragging yourself over the side and falling onto the grass, but it was awkward as hell and extremely undignified. Fine when you were alone, but not in front of these strange guys. And that's why it was so alarming when almost immediately, Vlad silently lifted the ladder up and away from the pool. "Hey, don't be a dick," Kelly said, swimming over to that side. I sighed and rolled my eyes. I still wasn't actually scared yet. The boys had been so bold coming into the yard, I was certain that they had to be connected to one of us. Could it really be Sweet Square Janet? "Hey, just making sure you stay where we can keep an eye on you," Chad said. His voice seemed to be filled with cruel teasing. "Yeah, we don't want you to attack us," Brad added. "That's not what I meant, dumbass," Chad snapped, like he was mad that Brad had chimed in on his oh-so-hilarious joke. All three of them were staring us up and down, their eyes traveling across our bodies. We were all in hot bikinis and the sun had almost fully set, but the garden was lit up brightly by our outdoor lighting. I strained to hear whether the Petersons were still in their yard, and I thought so, and that felt reassuring. If anything too bad started to happen, I could yell out to them pretty easily. The boys talked to us for a few minutes about some nonsense that I don't remember. All the while, the three of them circled the pool like coyotes, and it felt like they'd rehearsed this. They could tell that they were unnerving us, that we were vulnerable, and I know that they were enjoying it. Then Chad started messing around trying to dunk Claire. If Janet was the sensible one, Claire was the shy one, the least likely to enjoy that kind of horseplay. Plus, she had a boyfriend that she'd been going steady with for a long time. F off, Claire yelled. Don't touch me. Hey, chill out, babe. I'm just having fun, Chad said, acting all hurt. Yeah, I think it's time for you guys to leave, Dana said, beginning to pull herself over the side of the pool. In the blink of an eye, the almost silent Vlad darted over and shoved her quite forcefully back into the pool, and that's when I knew that we were actually in potentially some danger. Hey, don't shove her, I yelled, hoping the Petersons could hear us at this point. Chad's face suddenly turned serious. I suggest you bitches shut up and start talking, he said. Talking about what? I asked. I looked at my friends and realized that Kelly, normally the loudest, most outspoken, most confident one of us, had been strangely quiet through most of this. Kelly, do you know these guys? I asked, and she shook her head. No, I don't know them, but... Ah, so it's you, Chad said, pacing over to Kelly. The three of us instinctively closed in around her, only the pool walls between us and those guys. What's you? Dana asked. She's the one seeing her good friend Pete, Chad said. Kelly had in fact been seeing a new guy recently, Pete. Dana and Janet didn't like him so much, but I did. He was a bit of a stoner, didn't take things too seriously. Not long-term material for Kelly, or so I thought. He seemed fun enough for a fling. You're friends of Pete? Kelly asked, and she seemed relieved. Well, he wishes, Chad said. Pete owes us a lot of money, and we thought the other girl was his piece, but if it's you, maybe you can pay the debt. How much? Kelly asked, and she looked sick. I was still glancing towards the Petersons' yard. Don't even think about it. Brad growled and grabbed my shoulder. At the same time, Chad grabbed Kelly and Vlad grabbed Dana. Claire shrieked and backed up to the center of the pool. Stay right there, Chad told her. Then, as if to demonstrate why, the three boys dunked us all underwater and held us there. It wasn't hard to slip out of their grasps. We weren't in danger of drowning, but it still hurt, and it was still terrible. We joined Claire in the center of the pool, and that's when things started to get very unpleasant. If any of you scream or try to get out or do anything, then I promise you, we will hurt you really, really badly, Chad said. He pulls out a switchblade from his pocket. Just a small thing, but I could tell in the dim light that it was incredibly sharp. I also knew exactly how much damage 3 grown men could do to 4 bikini-clad women before anyone could get there. Please just leave us alone, Dana said. Pete isn't even here. He's not even stopping by tonight. Well, that just sucks for you girls, then, Chad said. We want our money. We need it. And this one here is Pete's girl, so. How much does he owe? Maybe we can pay you, I asked. Chad started to eye me up. He owes us $20. I kept eye contact with him, and then he burst out laughing. Brad joined in, and their cackles started to grate on me. No, he owes us some serious moolah, babe, Chad said. 5 grand. Oh, God. None of us had anywhere near $5,000 lying around the house, even if we wanted to hand it over to these weirdos. What the hell does Pete owe 5 grand for? Kelly demanded. Chad made an exaggerated sniffing sound and rubbed his nose. Oh, this and that. Pete usually had a stash of harder stuff than I was used to. He often had small baggies of coke, MDMA, and things like that. And Kelly had met him when she was trying to score some weed, so it wasn't too far-fetched to imagine that he dealt coke and owed these guys. I always assumed people like Pete got their drugs from more cartel-like types, but I was wrong. I've since realized that dealers exist at every level and all walks of life. Yeah. So either you pay us yourself, or you get Pete over here to settle his debt. Or maybe you girls could pay us back some other way. Chad chuckled. Brad clearly liked this idea, and he stared at me in particular, which I really didn't appreciate. Ew, no thanks, I remember saying. And I was considering what to do in that moment. We could rush them, or rush for the back gate, but we'd have to flop out of that pool first. If all of us did it, maybe one of us could get away, but what would those guys do to the rest in the meantime? And how could I communicate a plan without them hearing? Claire had drifted to the other side of the pool, maybe just to get some distance, and we were so focused on Chad and Brad we didn't notice Vlad had circled around. When Claire got close enough, he grabbed her by the hair. She let out a small yell before his hand clamped over her mouth. Well, someone better make a decision soon, or we're really going to hurt this one, Chad said. Claire's eyes were starting to fill with tears, and she looked genuinely terrified, and my heart broke for her. I can go call Pete, I remember Kelly saying. And this was before smartphones. It was the era of brick-like Nokias, and we all had cell phones, but we weren't glued to them, and we didn't bring them near water. So none of us had one at the pool. The only way Kelly could call Pete was by going inside. She told the boys that, and Chad considered it. "Fine, I'll go with you," he said. "Brad, Vlad, you watch these other lovely young ladies." He didn't say lovely young ladies, he said a nastier slur that I'm not going to repeat. "Kelly, don't," I said. "I'll call Pete and it'll be fine," she said, but her face said otherwise. Chad helped Kelly over the side of the pool and guided her to the back door, gripping her arm. She opened the sliding glass door, and I could see everything from the middle of the pool. I saw a flash of movement and heard a loud shattering crash. Kelly had grabbed the lamp off that table just inside the door and smashed it right into Chad's face. He let out a huge, bellowing scream and staggered back, falling over one of the patio chairs, and blood was beginning to pour down his face. Thank God, I thought. But Kelly wasn't done. She came running back into the yard, screaming and calling for help at the top of her lungs, so loud the neighbors had at that point heard. Quickly, the rest of us joined in. Kelly charged at Brad, swinging something that she'd grabbed from inside. It was one of the golf clubs Dana's boyfriend, Chris, always left lying around, and Chris never got scolded for leaving these clubs out again after this. Kelly swung the club down hard, cracking Brad's forearm as he tried to defend himself. Chad was already bolting for that gate, and I swear I saw a shard of lamp sticking from his cheek. He ripped the gate open and ran, and Brad was stumbling out after him. It felt like only seconds later that Mr. Peterson and a couple of other adult men rushed in. "They're getting away," Kelly screamed, but the men were more focused on checking in on us. They really had no idea what was going on. Vlad, for some reason, had kind of just stuck around and was sort of standing there, dumbfounded. "He's one of them," I told Mr. Peterson. And one of his friends, who turned out to be some off-duty cop, grabbed this Vlad character and pinned him to the ground, and basically sat on him like a pro wrestler. And it was a pretty hardcore ending to a terrifying, horrible experience. We called the cops and told them everything. They spoke to Pete, who denied owing these guys anything, but he was able to ID them. They were juniors at our college, too. Trying to get them charged for what they did was rough, since the only ones injured were Chad and Brad. We were going to push for assault charges, but in the end, we settled out of court with their families. Their parents were super embarrassed by their dumb-ass sons. It wasn't a great payday, and no, it didn't feel worth it. I wish we would have done more to punish them, but at least the drug stuff wasn't something their families could buy their way out of completely. They avoided jail because, of course, money always talks, but they still got hit with some real consequences. Expelled, probation, all kinds of things, and they knew better than to ever come near any of us again. Chad also had a wicked scar from that lamp, I remember hearing. Cooler than he deserved, honestly, but I doubt he thought so. You'd think Kelly would break up with Pete after all that, but no. I'm not kidding when I say they eventually got married and had a kid, and are still together to this day. We stayed in that house until our lease ended and then eventually moved out. Kelly and I stayed close, but the rest of the girls, including Janet, who hadn't been there that night, eventually drifted away. Kelly and I are still friends, and both she and Peter gave me permission to share this story, and you'll be glad to know that we've all settled down. Pete's a great dad, and both he and Kelly are nurses now. As for me, I'll keep that to myself. But I'll tell you one thing that I'm not: a swimmer. Have you ever experienced something terrifying near a pool? A strange figure in the water, a voice calling when no one was there, a memory you've buried for years? Speech balloon, share your thoughts in the comments, and if you have a true horror story of your own, we want to hear it. Envelope with arrow, send it to us via email or message us on our socials. We'll keep your identity anonymous if you prefer. Who knows, your story might just be featured in our next episode. Black Heart, if you enjoy these true horror stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers in the Dark for more chilling tales. Your voice keeps the whispers alive.